Hello, everybody. It's me again, trying to give you guys something to look at while you're stuck indoors or getting ready to hang out with friends and family, hopefully at a social distance that's not going to get you sick. All right, we're moving right along. I've got a major super unit on personality. Would have loved to break this one apart, but time did not allow us to do that. So, I took the best parts of each of the mods and I put them together for you. This is the stuff that I think that many of you would like to get a little bit more involved with. So I'll try to add some more stuff to my personal Google Classroom. So let's talk about personality. All right, so Mod 55, that's where we start diving into Freud and his interesting talks of psychoanalytic psychology. So when we talk about personality, it's a person's characteristic pattern of feelings, thinking, and acting. It underlies all of what makes us us. So these psychodynamic, which would be the newer version of his psycho analysis, would be this: personality is an interaction between the conscious and unconscious. And I want you to think about that every time we talk about Freud or psychoanalysis, psychodynamic. It's the unconscious. A lot of that may drive our behavior, and we're just not aware of it, including our motives and conflicts. It is an extension of Freud's psychoanalysis, which proposed childhood sexuality and unconscious motives. They influence our personality in ways that we're just not aware of. So he was a doctor, not a psychologist at first. His patients would come in and they didn't necessarily have any physical causes as to why they were showing the symptoms. And so he tried tracing it back to things that maybe are the unconscious. So it's a place for mostly unacceptable thoughts, wishes, feelings, and memories that resides within our mind. Now, he had a couple different techniques to try to uncover what these things were. So one of them is free association, and this would have been an awesome activity I would have done in class with you, where literally I'd say certain words, and without thought, without process, you just said the first thing that pops into your mind. And what we would do is listen to that objectively and see if we can look and see something hidden deep down, maybe even repressed, that could cause an issue or something that underlines an aspect of your personality. And then another one would be dream analysis. So remember, we talked about his wish fulfillment for dream analysis. We could explore some other things that would be in there, but wouldn't surface until you were asleep, where you would feel safe to explore maybe some of those inappropriate things that society would deem. So the way that he looks at your mind, he broke it down to three different parts. The id, which is your pleasure principle. It's the immediate gratification. It's all about the I want this and I want it now. And a lot of it we're not conscious of. I mean, look at how much of id makes up our personality according to Freud. Now, ego is your reality principle. It's trying to balance what's going on between your superego and id. Now, you're conscious of this one, so you are actively trying to do the balancing act, the executive act, if you will. And then you have superego. This is internalized. Now, for this one, outside awareness, but you have accessibility to it. This is the ideal standards. And sometimes our superego is what makes us feel bad about our actions. When we do something, we're like, oh, come on, you're better than this. So here, I'm gonna go back 1 second. Think about like the guy with the angel and the devil on his shoulders, and he's thinking about making a decision. The angel would be like, "What should you do in this situation?" The devil's like, "What do you want to do in this situation? Who cares about what other people think?" And then you're in the middle trying to decide. The angel would be your superego, id would be the devil, and you in the middle, that's the ego. So Freud's development stages. Now, I've been saying this one to you over and over again as a nice little acronym, a mnemonic device to help you with. Only awesome people learn guitar. So he thinks that people go through these psychosexual stages of development. Id, your pleasure seeking, really focuses on the erogenous zones. During phallic stage, he had what you believe the Oedipus complex, and they called it the Electra complex for girls. This is something that he kind of discovered, stumbled upon within his analysis with his patients. Um, Repression is a big part of This theories here, banishing from consciousness your feelings and trying to identify with rival parents, which you do go through. So don't think that this phase lasts a long time. It actually doesn't. And then he says you redirect this energy into identification. You incorporate many of your parents' values. You identify with that same sex parent, and it leads to, in his estimation, gender identity, a sense of being male, female, or a combination. And sometimes we may not go through that stage in an appropriate way, and we may have a fixation which doesn't allow us to kind of move forward. Would be maladaptive behavior from an unresolved conflict, possibly during that stage. So, like an oral fixation, that would mean something like you would have smoking or excessive eating later on because it centers on the mouth. Defense mechanisms. A lot of us are interested in these ways that we kind of defend ourselves. So, like our body has this ability to kind of protect ourselves from disease. Your mind may have this ability to kind of protect itself from injury. Tactics that reduce or redirect anxiety by distorting reality in our own mind. So for this one, repression underlies all the other defense mechanisms, but it's incomplete and that appears as symbols in our dreams. So sometimes our dreams may give us insight to what's going on there. But according to him, it might also be this Freudian slip. We may say something that we didn't necessarily intend. And he would say that that's our subconscious telling us that. In reality, we've kind of disproven that one. And we've said that there's a lot of things that sound an awful lot alike. And it could be a generalization. We may just mix up the words that we're trying to use. So you can look at some of the different defense mechanisms that he points out: regression, reaction formation, switching unacceptable impulses into their opposites. And they give you some examples here: projection, disguising one's own threatening impulse by attributing them to others. Um, there you go. Rationalization, talking about why they did it. Displacement, shifting sexual aggressive impulses towards a more acceptable, less threatening. This one, sublimation, transferring of unacceptable impulses into socially valued motives. Decides instead to join the cross country running team where all are accepted after maybe not making the soccer team. And then denial, denial. All right. So his theories were very influential for an awful lot of people. Now, these neo Freudians, these new Freudians, they looked at Freud and they said that you're right on a lot of these things. The subconscious does work at play. So, Alfred Adler, he's the one who came up with the inferiority complex. And a lot of times we're trying to conquer childhood inferiority feelings that we may have had. Now, Karen's thinking about this in a different way. Childhood anxiety triggers desire for love, security. So, her big problem with Freud was that her her thinking is that the assumption that Freud's making about especially inadequacies with women's super ego aren't based in, I don't know, I guess the reality. Now, Carl Jung, uh, which some would say would be, the protege, the guy who really picks up the baton and runs with it. The unconscious, more is more than just repressed thoughts. It includes this idea about collective unconsciousness that we have as a species. It's a reservoir of archetypes that we have for all people. So when we have this idea about what a hero, the rebel, the caregiver, we all have that. It comes from universal experience. Now, some of us look at it today from a different point of view. This idea about an inherited experience, I don't know. But shared evolutionary history shapes some universal dispositions. Yes, yes, we can look at that one and say probably. Projective tests. So when we look at certain tests that we have, and these are some cool things that we have here, which I'll probably end up dropping into your classroom. I want you to make up a story about what you see here. So, personality tests of ambiguous images designed to trigger projection of inner dynamics. So, you'd see this and what story you made up. Now, all of a sudden, we can say, like, okay, if you dreamed about them achieving a goal, we're presumed to be our own projection of goals. So it's kind of like this. It's a map of people's implicit motives. I don't know about you, but when I look at this, I see two garden gnomes giving each other a high five after a sweet dance. But that's just me. That would be the Rorschach ink blot test. Another one where we can look at in his projection, it's all about analyzing these interpretations that we see. Remember, the person doing it is not supposed to be subjective. It's supposed to be objective. You just listen to what they're saying and then try to analyze it. The problem is reliability. How do we know? And unfortunately, it's not necessarily objective, and it has been used at times, especially the Rorschach ink blot test, to inaccurately diagnose healthy adults as having some type of disorder. Contemporary views about Freud. His critics, developmental psychologists, really have a go at him. They're saying the development it's not just fixed in childhood; it's a lifelong process, and that Freud really overestimates the parental influence and really doesn't take into peer influence as much as he should. Doesn't provide testable hypotheses. This is one of the biggest retractions to his ideas. Offers after the fact explanation. It doesn't predict behavior. Remember, that's one of the big goals of psychology is to predict behavior. His supporters are going to fire back saying, I don't think that's what he intended in the first place. It wasn't meant to be predictive, but find meaning in our state of mind. Research supports ideas of unconscious defending ourselves against anxiety. This terror management theory, which is thinking about one's mortality, provokes aggression towards rivals and esteem for oneself. That's got support. So you can see some of the things that Freud was thinking about, getting the ball rolling, the unconscious, it's panned out. Freud was right about big idea that we are limited to access to all that goes on in our minds. That part. Yep. Yeah, he may have been right on that. Much of our everyday life is determined by unconscious, that implicit thought process, this two-track mind. All right, so humanist theories. This one's just a review of things we talked about. We discussed Maslow, and Rogers is kind of new to our discussion. Contrasted Freud with humanistic theories, emphasizing ways we strive for self-determination, self-realization. Remember the hierarchy of needs we talked about over here? They really are going to focus on this one, person centered perspective. People are basically good and free to pursue their own needs. Growth promoting social climate. These are the things that they really highlight. Acceptance, offering people, I'm sorry, accepting people offer unconditional positive regard. And there's that one unconditional positive regard attitude that we still have value, even knowing our failings. Genuineness, drop that facade, people. And then empathy, share, mirror others' feelings. Self concept, our thoughts and feelings about ourselves. They're central features of our personality. So, humanists test personality by asking people to survey themselves and evaluate that self concept. Describe yourself as you would ideally like to be, and then how you actually are. They influence us on a number of different levels in today's society, including counseling, education, child raising, management, all of that for positive psychology that we see today. It lies a lot from what they did with humanistic. Critics are going to take a shot at humanistic psychology and this whole entire process as being subjective. It's not rooted in scientific description. An emphasis on individualism. Yes, it is all about you, not necessarily about the collectivism. It can lead to self indulgent, selfish behavior. They also call it naive. Humanistics encourage needed hope. So when we sit there and we talk about a lot of the negatives that may be tied in psychology, they give us hope. But the problem is, it's not necessarily always based in realism. All right, so trait theories. Traits. Character patterns of behavior, disposition to feel and act certain ways, assessed by self reporting inventories, peer reports. So, can you look at certain things like if you're extroverted, can we see you act this way in a number of different situations? Introverted, don't confuse that with being shy. No, 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 no. The Myers Briggs was a really cool test that they came out with to kind of assess this. I've linked one right here for you to take. Now, it's kind of outlived its validity, but it is still fun to go through. Businesses will use it, career counseling. It can kind of give you a shove in a general direction, but don't take it as gospel as far as this is who you are. Don't let it typecast you. So, the personal inventory. It's a questionnaire that people respond to items designated to gauge wide range of feelings, behaviors. It's a lengthy one too, so you're looking at 500 questions. The most objective personality test is the Minnesota multi-facet personality inventory. For this one, true and false questions. Objective doesn't guarantee validity. Some people lie. And there's actually a lie aspect to this where they can kind of fizzle out some of the questions. Grouped questions into 10 clinical scales, and some of them would include depressive tendencies, masculine or femininity, introversion versus extroversion. It's important, but it's not the complete story. So we're still falling down a little bit, which is why the Big Five really attempts to address that. So Robert McRae and Paul Costa expanded the set of factors that includes, and this is where I want you to remember that acronym OCEAN. So we're talking about openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, neuroticism, and where we land on that scale, and it's a wide variety of ways. I'm going to I'm sorry, a whole bunch of tests that you can take that can show you where you would land on these. Are they consistent over time? That's the big question we have. Can I see that you are going to answer this in all these different situations? And many times our personality does seem stable, but these new situations and major events, they can shift our personality traits we express. It doesn't mean that doesn't it's not who you are, but under certain circumstances, we might not show that. This person situation controversy. We look for genuine personality traits that persist over time and across situations. As we age, this one we know true, and you can look at the graph here to support that. Our traits become more stable, but we also know that our behaviors for situation they can change. When we're in a formal setting, like we go to somebody's house that we're not really close friends with, we're going to be on our guard and we're going to hide some of our true traits. And then our behavior will be based on the social cues that we've learned. In informal situations, when we're around people that we've known for a long time, where we feel really comfortable, we're going to let our guard down and we're going to let what we really are, our true traits, those will emerge. Okay, Module 58, social cognitive theories. So, for social cognition, this perspective views that behavior is influenced by interaction between people's traits and their social context. So, think about how we would change our behavior based on where we are and who we're around. That would be important. Behavioral approach focuses on the effects of learning. We do this because we've been conditioned to do it, learned by observing and imitating others. That might be approach as far as our personality. Reciprocal determinism is the interaction between our behavior and then internal cognition, the way that we think, and the environment. Bandura, the guy that we talked about with Bobo, that learning of aggression proposed that our personalities are shaped by interaction of personality traits and then the environment and then the behavior. So the last one is this genetic environment. So genetically, we may have certain dispositions, and then the environment may cause that to actually take place. Having some genetic gene associated with aggression, plus being raised in a difficult environment, we're more likely to demonstrate adult antisocial behavior. So once again, we look at this over and over again, the biopsychosocial approach, and then you see personality in the middle, and then see biological influences, or psychological influences, and then the social cultural influences. Module 59, exploring the self. The self answers the question, who am I? And the center of our personality, that's what we are. Possible selves. So we look at our possible selves and see different versions of us, the best versions of us, but also sometimes what we fear becoming. The spotlight effect. I've seen so many examples of the spotlight effect. It's where imagine you had like a little stain on your shirt and you come to school. Now that stain's there and you know it's there. And in your mind, you might think that everybody else is sitting there staring at that stain. Maybe it's a little thing of mustard, a glob of relish, whatever it is. But the truth is, we get wrapped up in our own worlds that we sometimes don't even notice what's going on with other people. We definitely overestimate how much attention we think other people are paying attention to something like us, like a shirt or um, maybe even sometimes a behavior. So self-esteem, it's one's feelings of high or low self-worth. Now, that's not the same as self-efficacy, which is a sense of our competence and effectiveness. That's our belief about our ability to do something. Now, the benefits of high self-esteem, you're probably going to get better sleep. You're sleeping like a baby. Less likely to conform due to social pressure. Just because everybody else around you is doing it doesn't mean that you're necessarily going to do it, especially if it's something not good. and more persistent at difficult tasks. You're not going to be shaken by the events going around you. Now, the effects of low self esteem, you tend to be extremely sensitive and overly judgmental. All right, let's not go overboard on this one. Excessive optimism. So, if we're excessively optimistic, it can blind us to real risks, promoting unrealistic optimism about future life events. Uh, this I found interesting. People are overconfident when most incompetent. Just let that just sit in your head for a second. So Justin Kruger and David Dunning said this because it often takes competence to recognize competence. This ignorance of one's own incompetence phenomenon, it's called the Dunning-Kruger effect, can produce overconfidence, which kind of leads us into that discussion about self-serving bias. When stuff happens to us that it's not good, your mind has a way of trying to deflect it and make you feel the best way possible. So if you're an athlete, sometimes we credit our victories based off of our own facts or efforts. And if we lose, well, we got a bad break. The ref wasn't, fair. There's a number of other factors outside that allows us to save our ego. Students who receive poor test grades blame the teacher or the test, not necessarily themselves. Most people see themselves as better than average when we look at it. Narcissism and self-esteem. We've already taken a look at narcissism, excessive self-loving, self-absorption. People with this personality tend to be materialistic, desire fame, have inflated expectations. They gamble and cheat. These people, more often men, forgive less. They crave adulation. They're active on social media. They're waiting for those hits, and they hate being criticized. So we've got two different types of self-esteem we can look at it too. So for secure self-esteem, sense of selfless, it's less contingent on external evaluations. They are the ones who feel secure in who they are, and they know that they're going to be accepted for who they are. Defensive self-esteem, they focus on sustaining itself, making failure and criticism feel threatening. They really do feel threatened by this. Defensive people respond to perceived threats with anger and aggression because they're not secure. All right, individualism versus collectivism. We've talked about this one a number of different times. You live in an individualistic society. We give priority to our own goals over group goals and defining one's identity in terms of personal attributes, not group identifications. It's hard in times of national crisis like the one we're in to kind of step back and give up our own personal goals and look at the collective. They have an independent sense of me and awareness of their unique personal convictions, values. It doesn't mean that it's bad. It just means that that's how we view it. Collectivism is giving priority to goals over one's uh, group and defining one's identity accordingly. Group identification provide a sense of belonging, a set of values, and assurance of security. So you can see all the other things that go along with that. They definitely have more attachments to family, clan, company. They do respect their elders. And this is the last chart, so you can take a look at this one. I've already linked it on my page, so go ahead and look at that, and then realize I'll have more coming for you. So hopefully, until the next time I get a chance to talk to you, you're doing well. Take care of yourselves.